All right, let's get right into it. We're going to pull back the curtain on how all software actually works. And forget all the complex jargon you've heard. Turns out, it's all based on a pretty simple recipe.
I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about it? You're playing a game like Roblox, you level up, or you tap a button on your favorite app. What's actually happening behind the screen? It feels like magic, right?
Well, I'm here to tell you, it's definitely not magic. In fact, pretty much every single piece of software is built using just a handful of core ingredients. And today, you're going to learn exactly what they are.
So, where do we even begin? Well, we start with the absolute foundation, the blueprint for everything else. It's called sequence, and that's really just a fancy word for order. It just means the computer reads your code one line at a time, from top to bottom. You know, just like following a recipe. You don't bake the cake before you mix the batter, right? The order is absolutely crucial.
So, think about when you start a game. It shows you the company logo, then the main menu, then maybe it asks you to log in. That is sequence in action. It's that simple, predictable, line-by-line flow that gets everything started.
But of course, programs can't just be a straight line. They have to react, to make decisions. And that brings us to our next key ingredient, adding choices.
This is called selection. And this is how we start to give our programs a bit of a brain. We use simple little words like if and else to tell the computer, hey, check if this thing is true and then pick a path.
It basically creates a fork in the road. The program asks a simple question. If the answer is yes, it goes down one path. Else, if the answer is no, it goes down a totally different one. It's a simple little choice, but it's an unbelievably powerful idea.
For example, look at this. Let's say a program has to give a grade. If the score is over 90, it prints out A. In any other case, or else, it prints B. See? Simple question, two paths. That's selection right there.
And you can even stack these decisions inside each other. So here, the code first checks if the username is right, and only if that's true, it then checks if the password is correct. This is literally how login systems and apps like Roblox work every single day.
Okay, so our code can follow an order and it can make choices, but what about doing things over and over and over again? Well, that's where our next ingredient comes in. This is kind of the engine of our recipe. It does all the heavy lifting.
This is called iteration, or, what most people just call a loop. I mean, imagine you're making a game and you have to tell the computer to do something 1,000 times. You're not going to write that line of code 1,000 times. No way. You use a loop to just say, hey, do this thing over and over.
So yeah, instead of writing it all out, you give one simple command. Like a for loop can say, run this code exactly 5 times, or 100 times, or 1,000,000. It is a massive time saver.
And loops are amazing for building things up, like calculating a total. So let's say we start at 0. The first time through the loop, we add 1, so our total is 1. The second time, we add 2, so the total becomes 3. Third time, we add 3, total is 6. And it just keeps going. The loop handles all of that for you.
And this isn't just for some abstract math problem. This is the exact same logic that's used to count how many items you have in your online shopping cart, or to add up points for your score in a game.
Now, to make our choices and loops really smart, we need one more little tool: logical operators. You can think of these guys, and, or, and not, as kind of the logic glue. They let us combine questions to make way smarter decisions. So, for example, to get into an event, you need to check 2 things at once. The code would ask, if the person's age is over 18 and if they have a ticket, then access granted. If either one of those things is false, nope, no access. See how that works? Super simple logic, but it powers incredibly complex stuff.
So there we have it. We've got our ingredients, sequence for order, selection for choices, and iteration for doing things on repeat. Now let's put it all together and see the final dish.
And there it is, the full recipe. You've got sequence, the line-by-line instructions for starting a game. You've got selection, using if and else for things like scoreboards and letting users in. And you've got iteration, using loops for game rounds or countdowns. That's really
because when you mix and match these 3 ingredients in clever ways, you get all the stuff we use every day. Scoreboards, login systems, chat features, shopping carts, power-ups,
all of it is just a combination of these same three ideas.
So that's the big secret. Sequence, selection, iteration. Order, choices, and repetition. It's not 1,000 complicated rules. It's just these three powerful concepts that are the bedrock of literally all software.
So, hey, congratulations. You didn't just sit through an explainer, you've actually learned the fundamental building blocks of every app and game out there. You kind of get how code thinks now.
So I guess the only question left is, now that you know the secret recipe, what would you build?